The last 2 decades of the 20th century were a golden age of technology. The rise of cell phones, the World Wide Web, personal computing, autonomous drones.
Change is occurring so rapidly that even those involved find it difficult to keep pace.
Witnessing every milestone was the TV series Beyond 2000. Its presenters travelled the globe, searching for innovations that would give us a glimpse into the future. Now that we're in the future, it's time to look back at the tech that did and didn't change the world. From the iconic to the offbeat.
Ready?
We're travelling back.
Fire.
Before 2000. The 1980s and 1990s were full of optimism. There was a tech fix for everything. But we weren't just consuming innovation, we were building it.
The boom in consumerism not only fed the desire to have new things, but also fed people's desire to invent them. Anything was possible.
And as backyard inventors crafted bold new designs, some designers took their creativity to the extreme, making innovations that seemed somehow more suited to the psychedelic 60s.
Project Blue Star is a space station for humans and dolphins.
It's a bonkers idea. I would pay any amount of money to get there.
Wild ideas came thick and fast and rewrote the rules of innovation. There was the fanciful, the slightly offensive, and the downright hazardous.
I would never go in a plane assembled in someone's backyard.
The line between genius and ludicrous became awfully blurry in left of field. By the year 1990, we were well and truly done with the 80s. Cassette tapes, shoulder pads, and mullets were gonski. And now Steve Roberts was killing another 80s icon, office work.
The idea of being able to travel through the outback or wander across eastern Russia or someplace like that and still be able to communicate while living on a bicycle is provocative.
So he built the Winnie Bico, which freed him from the office. He spent his time working while crisscrossing the entire continent of North America.
Technology is really quite liberating. You know, we've gone through some dark ages of computing when computers were big, monolithic, ugly things that force you to sit at desks and fill out forms. I live in data space now. It's my hometown.
His mobile office had 5 PCs, radio, cell phone, and a fax machine. So Steve could work from anywhere in the world, even mid-ride.
These are the bike's primary computer screens, the Macintosh and the T1000, which is my main computing environment on the bike, which I operate using the handlebar keyboard. And underneath, there's a third screen for computer-aided design, satellite tracking, and maps.
And it was all controlled by the world's most versatile helmet.
What are all these bits and pieces?
Well, I call this whole thing the brain interface unit. This is a heads-up display that allows me to see a full-size computer screen that appears to be floating in space in front of me. And these are the controllers for the head mouse, which allows me to steer the cursor on the Macintosh by simply moving my head around.
Being stuck at a desk, I don't think anyone wants to do that. If you have a think about Microsoft, it was started in Bill Gates' parents' garage, and there's a bloke that's now worth billions of dollars, but doesn't have to do a 9 to 5. It really just spurs you on to try something different.
And being a pioneer came with left-of-field challenges, like the cars on the road.
Sometimes they hit each other because they're too busy watching me. I guess that's better than the opposite, though.
Steve survived 53,000 kilometres on the road before trading his bike for a boat. Today, his lifestyle has caught on. There are now over 40 million digital nomads, but many more of us have ditched the office.
While Steve was revolutionary in his time, now we pretty much just call that remote working.
If the nomadic lifestyle looked like too much legwork, Australia had a fix. Just grab 3 friends and jump on the Supernova.
Riding along on my push bike, honey.
This solar-powered cycle was Dr. Yor Otabasi's version of the e-bike.
This is quite a sophisticated system where we are trying to combine the human power that acts on these pedals and the electrical motor that is driven by the solar cells.
Yeah.
The effect of this array is such that as if every rider has a companion in his back,
Right.
pedaling as hard,
Yeah.
but weighs nothing and doesn't cause any air resistance.
It put the Supernova among the elites. Hitting speeds of 50 kilometres an hour, the team were preparing to race from Germany to Switzerland against other solar-powered vehicles.
Well, it really feels great. You can actually feel the power of the sun helping you along. I'm not sure that I'd really like to keep doing it for 480 kilometres, though. I think I'll leave that to Dr. Otabasi and the rest of the team.
While winning a specific solar race might not seem like it's going to lead to solar panels on our roofs, it's one of those first sort of seeds that is planted, and people start thinking, oh, solar energy is a viable form of energy. It all starts with these very sort of like left-of-field ideas.
If you are after the wild and unconventional to fuel inspiration, look no further than the Toyota Idea Olympics. Each year, 30,000 technicians competed to create the world's most outrageous car. Like the handy Commuter, an electric suitcase-sized ride for the 20th century executive in a rush. Or the road motor skis that taught novices the basics before they hit the slopes. And then there was the bike that converted into a wheelchair so injured cyclists could push themselves home. Practicality wasn't a priority, which was kind of the point.
I love the concept of using your employees to innovate because it gives you a chance to do something different, contribute to the company, and perhaps come up with new ideas for the company as well.
And while most creations never made it outside the car park, others were simply new takes on vehicles inventors had been trying to crack for decades. Like the amphibious car.
There had been multiple attempts to make a water kart, but some of the early attempts just did not work out. So we had the amphibian, which was made of steel, and of course, you put steel in water, it rusts. Not a great idea. And then we had the hobby car, and the hobby car was engineered better, but it was way too expensive.
The $70,000 price tag was too much for people to part with. But in 1996, along came a more viable and affordable take on the amphibious car, the Dutton Mariner.
It's a really weird experience driving a car into the water, but these controls make it simple. Just move this lever to engage the hydraulic pumps for the water jets, shift it into neutral, and off we go.
Manufacturing was surprisingly straightforward.
Instead of developing costly components, most of the mechanics and fittings come from a standard Ford Fiesta. The only custom-built feature is this fiberglass shell.
The marine jets were also standard technology.
So we have a hydraulic pump that's attached to the standard Fiesta engine, and that then turns a hydraulic motor which is attached to the jet unit. So you don't have shafts going all the way through the hull as you would do with a normal boat.
With production costs slashed, the price was unbeatable. The car retailed at 20 grand, only a few thousand more bucks than brand new wheels. For designer Tim Dutton, business was starting to roll in.
The majority of people just have them for fun, but we do actually sell them to people that use them to get them from one side of a river to another.
There weren't many other reasons to buy a Mariner, unless a slower commute was the goal. Its top water speed was 15 kilometres an hour.
It's not exactly all that fast, and if you need to travel long distances, it's going to take you forever to get there. I think that a lot of people have this idea that they want to be able to go do this stuff, but ultimately you had to drive around a vehicle that looked like a boat. I don't know that many people would want to do that.
And while the Dutton Mariner is one of the few water cars to be commercially produced, their sales have barely made a splash. In 35 years, Tim has sold 280. 8 years earlier, we discovered the Scuba Cat. This bizarre-looking vessel outpaced the Dutton Mariner threefold. It couldn't take to the road, but it had another trick up its sleeve. It could travel underwater thanks to a constant supply of air.
And that comes in here through this slot in this pylon, and it's pumped up through this ducting system here, and it keeps the air circulating continually inside the pod. And the controls are very simple too, but Terry's going to give me a bit of a run through with them. Terry, these are the gear levers on either side.
It's very basic. You've got a forward and reverse each side.
For each engine?
For each engine, and a throttle control for each engine. Instruments and key, tachometers and dials for oil pressure, etc. Then you've got your hydraulics, which operate your up and down movement.
And that's just by pulling inwards or outwards on those two levers?
On those levers.
I see. So I think perhaps you reckon I could have a go at it?
I
pretty
think so.
soon? We'll try it right here anyway and see how it works.
Terry had insisted on this practice run in the harbour, where not a lot could go wrong. The pontoon stayed afloat and the pod could only drop 3 metres below. But that allowed a truly unique perspective.
Well, it's an absolutely sensational experience inside here. You're fully enclosed inside this bubble, and you feel quite secure. The fresh air is coming in through here and going out the other side, so you've got plenty of air to breathe. But the best thing is the view. If only it was a little bit less cloudy, you'd be able to get an absolutely fabulous view. On a clear day, it would be just like another world.
When you consider that 70% of the world is water and 95% of it is unexplored, it has a real mystery to it, and wanting to see and know more, I think, is a really natural thing.
And today we have the technology to truly explore the deep.
Nowadays, we've got things like private luxury submarines and underwater hotels, which I think has kind of in some ways always been the dream.
While venturing into the abyss felt far-fetched, roaming the skies faster and further than ever before was becoming a reality.
Humans, we love the idea of flight. And in the 80s, we started to really see, I guess, developments in aerospace engineering, and we were much more attuned to this idea that we could get on a plane and go somewhere.
And in 1990, we witnessed one of the boldest attempts to conquer the sky. Strapping just a propeller and engine to his back, Bert Gartig claimed he could fly. But with blades spinning inches from his head, safety was crucial.
So this is the security switch.
Yes. If something wrong at start or landing, if you put this position, cut off the right.
Stopping the rotor mid-flight seemed sketchy, until we realised the PGO Jet was mostly parachute. When the cameras were rolling, the thing couldn't quite take flight. Just slip in this footage. Surely no one will notice, right?
Flight is this really freeing thing. And so I think the PGO Jet was a product of that kind of thinking. And we wanted to be able to go, let's just strap on the turbine and get out of here. Would it be something I would do? No, but that optimism still bleeds through.
While the PGO Jet favoured light winds, in 1999 we discovered a plane which relied on an abundance of air. Called the Stingray, designer Andreas Reinhardt had been inspired by nature.
As usual, it's not such a new idea. All the barns from the birds are empty to save weight.
And with that knowledge came the idea for the wing structure. A lightweight, durable fabric envelope filled with air. But it wasn't the only component drawn from the animal kingdom.
I saw never a bird with wheels. He has in his legs a catapult to accelerate,
which Andreas was trying to mimic with this new takeoff system. An engine-powered steel rod launched the plane into the air and removed the need for a runway.
Looking at nature, looking at birds, butterflies, We have these amazing examples of different modes of moving around the world, and we've just created that world where we can do things that other creatures can do that we can't.
It's working so well that it just might be the beginning of an affordable, inflatable new era for aviation. In the future, a liquid crystal polymer 10 times stronger than steel will make the inflatable wings virtually indestructible.
And with stronger technology on the way, Andreas believed he could build a 12-person plane. The project ran out of money before it could upscale, but inflatable planes haven't been forgotten. Inventors are now designing 100 passenger airships for a more sustainable future in sky travel.
Novelty seeking is such a huge thing in progress. And I think with that comes a real passion that can create things that we've never thought of.
By the 1990s, inventors had proved there were many ways to take to the road, water and skies. But these didn't always inspire confidence. So a new wave of designers rose to develop tech that made the world safer, starting in the sky.
Modern aeroplanes are equipped with a number of safety features. Life vests, oxygen masks, life rafts. But really, when you're thousands of metres up in the air, to a large extent, you're in the lap of the gods. Well, an American inventor disagrees. He's built a device in his garage that he claims will save almost all passengers in virtually every kind of aviation disaster.
With the aeronautical life-saving system, designer Landon Tinder hoped to revolutionise the way we flew. Instead of regular seats, passengers would sit in a pod that protected them in emergencies.
So far, the company's made just a half-size working model, but it functions the same as the full-size finished product would. The shell is bulletproof, and they claim it will withstand an impact of up to 30 Gs, which is about twice the impact of a 747 hitting the ground from a fall of 500 metres.
Before you crashed, the door would seal and an airbag would inflate.
Not only does it protect passengers from impact, there are perforations in the fabric of the bag at about face height that allow the passengers to breathe in the oxygen that's inside the bag. They claim there's enough air to keep occupants alive for 3 hours in a completely sealed pod.
I'm not claustrophobic, but I don't think anyone can handle being in an enclosed, very thick pod just after you've been in a plane crash with no knowledge of when you're getting out. The human psyche is not built for that.
And aircraft weren't either. This wild new approach to safety would reduce plane capacity by 28% and send ticket prices sky high. Landon, a true optimist, wasn't deterred. He was planning full-scale tests.
We're going to go out to the desert. We've got all the plan of the facility and the various equipment, and we're actually going to, through the cooperation of McDonnell Douglas, use one of their aircrafts and crash it, and really crash it severely to see how successful the product is and put it through its paces.
We never got to see the passenger pod take flight. But in 1989, we witnessed another ambitious safety design being put through its paces.
It was around this time that car manufacturers were taking safety seriously. Seatbelts were a thing, airbags were a thing.
But with the safety seat, all those innovations would soon be redundant.
When a vehicle containing the safety seat collides with another one, the seat moves forwards and upwards on these runners. So that instead of the driver or the passenger being thrown out of their seat and possibly even through the windscreen, the motion of the safety seat absorbs some of the forward impact.
Inventor Randy Bavay was so sure of his design, he wasn't using crash dummies to test its safety. He was using his son, Ricky.
So, Ricky, what number impact is this for you?
479.
And how fast are you going to go this time?
Probably about 30.
Which is 48 kilometres an hour. Not exactly breakneck speed, but fast enough to make a head-on disastrous.
Wow! How did that feel?
Excellent.
have any impact on your body?
No, I didn't taste nothing.
That's incredible.
While car design labs used dummies with sensors to assess crash damage, Randy simply relied on trial and error.
We can only tell that it hasn't affected Rick or myself or any of the other test drivers. There are no ill effects as far as we know.
Using a human in this, I guess, was to prove the concept that, look, that person didn't die. If you weren't ready for the crash, were looking away or turned or something, you wouldn't survive one of these really big impacts.
So we stuck to seatbelts and airbags. But training people to be more responsible behind the wheel? That called for more left-of-field experimentation.
This is the latest approach to teaching people about the hazards of drinking and driving. They're called Substance Abuse Alcohol Simulator Glasses, or SAS for short, and they're designed to let you see what life is like through the bottom of a glass. I tell you, you think I look funny, you should see things from my perspective. Simply by adjusting the lenses like this, you can create more than 20 negative mind-altering effects.
From seeing double to messing with your peripheral vision.
Now, the whole aim is to teach children about the dangers of drinking long before they're old enough to take a sip or even get behind the wheel, for that matter. And the glasses provide a playful way of doing that. Now, the Bondi nippers here, who haven't had a nip at all, are going to test out the glasses for us. Isn't that right, Dean?
Yeah.
Just a few minutes behind these beer goggles made simple tasks impossible. So kids understood the risks of driving drunk.
The SAS glasses aren't the trendiest eyewear on the beach, but they do mimic the effects of being drunk, all the bad effects. Except, of course, that you don't get a hangover and you're able to remember the experience with full 20/20 hindsight.
Before we could track our kids with location sharing, finding lost tots was a slow and stressful ordeal. But at Expo 88, we discovered a system that made it faster. And the Beyond 2000 hosts couldn't wait to demo how it worked.
I wonder if I could report a lost Watto.
Yes, can you tell me what he looks like, please?
Well, he's kind of tall and a bit drippy, and he's got a yellow flower in his lapel.
Okay, if you'd like to wait here, I'll just see if we can find him for you.
Thanks a lot.
This invention started off low-tech. But once the kid was located...
Are you Watto?
Yes, I am.
We've been looking for you.
This primitive use of video conferencing linked them with their parents.
Now, there are 5 of these computer stations spread around the site, and at one of them, we hope to find our little friend Watto. Ah, yes, there he is. Hello, Watto. What are you doing there?
They've given me a colouring book.
I think because video calling was still a relatively new technology at the time, finding any application for it felt a little bit exciting.
Stay there and I'll come and get you.
All it really did was save you the walk from point A to point B to visually check that that is in fact your child.
In the 80s and 90s, saving the environment was also on the agenda. And when it came to sustainable clothing solutions, it didn't get any greener than a grass coat. Heather Ackroyd and Dan Harvey weren't fashion designers.
Prepare yourself for a heavy coat.
They were artists who stumbled into the scene after turning buildings green.
We had worked together initially on a site-specific piece of work in Italy, and we were growing grass vertically up the walls. But we also grew a circle of grass in a very similar way to this, which became a skirt, and we grew a hat as well.
So the natural progression was, of course, to make a coat.
There are 3 kilos of seed in this grown garment. It's just about enough to cover a tennis court. But if you want that fur effect, then you need a large amount of seed in a small space. It's taken about a fortnight to get to this stage, and as you can see, it looks like a pelt. It even feels like one.
Your average grass coat has a lifespan of about 3 weeks. And unless you don't mind grass and seed all over the carpet, then it's probably safe to class it as impractical. But it was never meant as a commercial venture. Heather and Dan simply wanted to plant the seeds of thought.
We're not necessarily suggesting that this is a practical garment, but maybe people will think about the relationship between themselves and nature in a slightly different way.
Left of field ideas like this are important in helping us question the way things are. We've definitely seen that continue with environmentalism now. You know, this idea that you make fashion out of trash, and that it can also make people question their own clothing and what's it made out of, how did it get here, but also what happens next? Am I going to throw it away?
But if you lived in Japan in 1994, questioning your waste habits was already second nature. Thanks to mandated clear garbage bags, citizens were thinking twice before committing a recycling faux pas.
But these transparent trash bags are also exposing a curious cultural phenomenon. It appears a lot of Japanese women are now refusing to throw away their old underwear in case the garbage man sees it in the bag. Apparently, they won't even wrap them up in case an animal tears open the bag and drags their old garments across the street. Well, one company has taken on the mysterious case of panty paranoia, and its answer is to solve by dissolve.
Using hot water, women were now turning their briefs into unrecognisable strips of cotton, thanks to a secret ingredient woven in.
This is Solvron in its raw form. It's a synthetic filament made from polyvinyl alcohol, or PVA. When you immerse it in boiling water, it firstly turns into a glue-like substance, and then after a while it just dissolves altogether.
It does beg the question of whether or not these women are using their underpants as a single-use item, because Solvron also dissolves easily enough that it doesn't work for permanent clothing. You wouldn't be able to wash it like you need to. And also, what pot are you using to dissolve your underpants? I shall not be coming over for dinner.
Japan still mandates clear garbage bags, but dissolvable undies have inevitably disappeared.
And speaking of inevitability, I suppose it had to happen that the funeral business and the environmentalists would eventually realise they have a lot in common. After all, when you think about it, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, dying is really the ultimate in recycling. And now, seriously committed environmentalists can opt for a disposable coffin.
The piece box was a cardboard casket that turbocharged decomposition and reduced cremation emissions by 75%.
It wasn't just the major material that had been really thought about, but it was also smaller parts like the snap holders.
That were made of recyclable plastic.
They went that extra mile to make sure that they were coming up with something that's gradually biodegrades.
And as you can see, it assembles in minutes without any special tools.
It was all refreshingly no frills until they added the frills. And its designers were sure that a lively market awaited.
Clearly, we have cardboard used in everyday life. Why not cardboard used for coffins?
Would you be happy to be buried in one?
Absolutely. Their customers weren't complaining, perhaps because they were 6 feet under. And today, nearly 70% of the living want environmentally friendly funerals.
Sometimes some of the best ideas have started out being left of field. You know, that's why we say think outside the box, because often that ends up becoming part of what we take for granted as a norm. And perhaps one day this will be the norm.
The 80s and 90s were decades of fun and exploration. Technology had revamped many of our favourite pastimes, and in 1988, the sport of horse racing was entering a new age, with a remote-controlled athlete called SuperJock.
And weighing in at 22 pounds, we have one of tonight's favourites, Juan, dressed in his silver and maroon. You may not have noticed, but Juan is in fact a robot. So, like all jockeys, he has nerves of steel and an iron will. The horse, however, is real, although it's a slightly scaled-down version of a traditional thoroughbred.
Humans weren't entirely redundant. Trainers on the infield controlled the jockeys with a radio set. It was harder than it looked,
Oh, sorry about that.
as Amanda Keller soon found out.
I'm having trouble discerning the left and the right here. I mean, I'm confused. That poor horse must be going insane.
But back in the hands of a pro, this indoor miniature take on horse racing was built to bring entertainment to the masses all year round.
When you bring the traditional outdoor sport inside, you get, number one, much better visibility. The fans are right on top of the action, okay? And number two, speed is a relative thing. And anything in a containing space is going to appear faster than it does in the great outdoors.
It's hard for me to believe that he just wanted to bring the fun of horse racing to everyone. Being able to have horse racing that takes fewer resources, less space, that's really appealing if you want to have more horse racing in more places to make money off it.
And that business model may have worked if he'd picked a sport less steeped in tradition. For thousands of years, we'd watched humans in the saddle. There was simply no need to change. Unless that seat was on a bike in the Netherlands, where a silent epidemic was flaring up. Saddle soreness.
The most common problem for both sexes was seat bone sores, actual sores on the pressure points. But second on the list for men was genital anaesthesia, actual numbness of the penis. Also swelling at the perineum, that region on the underside just near the base of the penis. For women, it's genital irritation, vulvitis, inflammation of the vulva that leads to complications within the urethra.
And while the Dutch are usually direct, when it came to their bike seats, they were dancing around the issue. Psychologist Henri Christians found them increasingly inclined to clam up.
In the cycling shop, they do not talk about the problems with the genitals. So they say, well, my saddle is not very well. Can you do something to it? And, well...
But they're too inhibited to be specific.
Yes, it is.
But in a science setting, riders were more open. So Christians designed a rigorous suite of tests that zeroed in on every groin pain.
That's very hard.
Oh yes, it was designed special for men.
For men, nice and
okay,
hard.
Let's try another one, a softer one.
And armed Marika Gronendijk with vital data.
I tried to design a saddle that just support the seat bones and not the private parts of the person. And I hope their complaints will disappear.
The result? A saddle with wings.
You just clip them on in the shop and keep trying them till you find the one that suits you. So in the same way that we have running shoes to fit all sizes, so we will have bicycle seats. A crucial difference, though, is this gap between the two wings, where genitals can rest easily.
The wing saddle looked like a pretty good invention. You do really only need to kind of support the sit bones, but there is too much focus on how it was affecting your genitalia to be something that people want to go into a shop and purchase.
From Maastricht to Groningen, Dutch genitalia could finally rest easy. But the best fix for saddle soreness was switching to a more genital-friendly sport.
Well, that was a good workout. And I did it in a quarter of the time I normally do, thanks to these strange-looking boots on my feet. You just have to jog in them for half a kilometre to realise that your heart rate has doubled and that you're panting as if you'd run around about 5 kilometres.
The Exalopa shoe was part rollerblade, part trampoline, and fully committed to tripling the calorie burn while preventing shin splints.
It's all in the design of this spring, which works in a similar way to a trampoline. As I bounce up and down, my leg muscles are given a chance to contract, absorb the shock, and take away some of the damaging impact from the rest of the body.
But shock horror, the Exalopa didn't jump off shelves. 2 years later, out of Africa, a new skateboard meandered onto the scene.
Now what they've done is essentially Each pair of wheels from a conventional skateboard has been given its own platform here on the Snakeboard. Each platform is connected with a bar, but what's unique and patented is this remarkable swivelling action of each platform that gives it the extraordinary manoeuvrability.
The Snakeboard opened up a world of moves impossible on a skateboard. You could skate on the flat, go uphill, or even turn like a surfer or snowboarder.
You're not always at the beach, you're not always at the snow, so bringing them into a board that you could ride in your urban environment, I think this was a really innovative idea.
But the first curve to tackle was the learning curve.
How easy is it to learn?
That's a good question. It depends on the skill of the person who's getting onto it. However, usually it ranges between 5 minutes and probably a day, 2 days. Now, once you're in that position, change back to your toes together, move up in that direction. Okay, now you've got to
go away and let me do it in private.
It was going to take Brian Smith more than 5 minutes to become a fully sick snakeboarder, but would it be worth it?
Skateboarding, inherently cool. You're getting up a bunch of speed, you're doing a lot of cool tricks, you're able to like flip and do that kind of stuff. You bring in the snakeboard and they're doing this weird like waggling motion up a hill. That does not look fun to me.
Now known as streetboarding, the Snakeboard survives, still waiting to wiggle its way into the limelight. In 1995, we decided rollerblades and dune buggies needed an upgrade. So they added a parachute, went to the beach and called it kite buggying.
As a beginner, I'm starting off with smaller sails because, whoa, theoretically it's easier that way. What I have to keep in mind is that I have to get the kite to actually steer me around these turns. This is harder than it looks. Whoa!
Once mastered, though, kite buggiers could perform show-stopping acrobatics, rivaled only by the headgear.
I feel like the helmets were just there to foster a sense of community amongst the very small group who were participating. It's kind of like putting on a uniform and, yeah, we're kite buggiers.
There's people that have been doing some very amazing speeds on them. There's a guy in England was radared by a policeman at 68 mile an hour. That's very fast.
And with buggiers charging as if they were on a freeway, their bodies were bound to take a beating.
I fall off quite regularly trying to do little different tricks and spins and that sort of thing, but it's all part of the fun. Most of the time, the hard problem is stopping yourself from laughing so much.
The 80s and 90s was a time of great optimism, and with great optimism comes a great inability to see the downsides of something. The sky was the limit and people weren't afraid.
And while kite buggies still roam distant sands, over time we've realised that kites are much more fun on water. The innovations in the 80s and 90s streamlined household chores into automated solutions. While many of us welcomed a future free of domestic drudgery, inventor John Osborne embraced the mundane with the world's first steam-powered lawnmower.
Steam engine, in many ways you could say it's the nearest thing to life that man's ever created.
What do you mean by that?
It has a life of its own. It has a spirit of its own. You think it's your servant, but it's your master.
And this guy's a fifth Dan master of left-field thinking. Did we mention the lawnmower doubled as a train? For no particular reason, but to prove that not all progress was good.
The 80s and 90s was really that era of mass production of things. And what is fascinating about this guy is he wanted to make something bespoke. Making something with your own hands from scratch that's beautiful and works, I think is actually becoming more and more exciting.
While John wasn't fueled by profits, other designers were hoping to cash in on their one-of-a-kind creations.
In the real world, 90% of inventions don't make it into the marketplace. And a lot of that's because there's simply nowhere for them to go. Established stores just aren't interested in small production runs. But now, the new product store will give them a chance.
The shelves were stocked with bizarre knickknacks other shops weren't game to carry.
inventors must spend a lot of time in the smallest room in the house because a lot of the products here in the store are toilet orientated.
Like this pedal that raised and lowered the seat.
The perfect gentleman. The brochures say that men welcome this hands-off convenience and women appreciate the results.
It was hailed as a marriage saver, but their bestseller was set to divide parents and kids.
And you know when you're doing or playing video games, it's always hard to get around the keys with your fingers because your fingers are either too big or too small and it doesn't work that well. Well, this little device pops onto your number 5 key, like so. You just put it on like that, and you rotate it to depress the cursor keys like that.
Call me old-fashioned, but I've never had a problem with just hitting the keyboard keys myself to play a game. But I can see the appeal of, like, something that might make you feel like you have a competitive edge.
This has been your bestseller?
Yeah, that's been our bestseller. We've sold $500,000 worth of these things.
It wasn't the only moneymaker. There was the Bug Vacuum Zapper, or this low-tech approach to saddle soreness.
And we haven't finished with the toilet yet. What's good enough for you is good enough for your cat. A kitty litter that clips onto the side of the bowl. Your cat hops up onto here. There are holes underneath here for drainage and a specially provided scoop for scooping bits out so they can be flushed.
Not all were must-have inventions, and the inventors weren't all flushed with success. But if they were peddling them today, it might be a different story.
I think what the internet has really enabled is products, no matter how weird they are, to find a buyer. I remember during COVID finding a guy who was 3D printing little SARS-CoV-2 viruses, Christmas tree decorations. You know, the kind of innovation that before the internet, that would have been really hard to sell.
While a trove of trinkets transformed the home, it was one simple innovation that revolutionised the office. By 1995, taking calls on the go had freed us from our desks, returning only to send documents.
But now, this new handy-sized helper could soon cheaply connect those on the road back into the fax stream. It's called Fax View. All you have to do is take this connection, plug this end into your phone, like so, and the card into the Fax View.
This was extremely cumbersome. You couldn't really see. Didn't look like it was all that useful. But I think it was innovation at its core, right? It was that portable communication method that just didn't exist at the time.
This prototype can only receive and send faxes to other fax machines, but the makers hope to include a small keypad and even a special pen so that deals can be signed with just one call from almost anywhere in the world.
2 years later, email arrived, turning the Fax View into a dinosaur. The Fax View appealed to the hard-working professional. And for the paranoid?
This is the truth phone. It works on the assumption that when we lie, it causes stress. Stress causes micro-tremors in our voices. Tremors imperceptible to human hearing. But this has a built-in processor which can pick them up. When you want to test somebody, you firstly have to calibrate it to a truthful response. So just ask them about the weather or their state of health.
I've got a sore foot.
Then throw them a curly one. If the reading suddenly goes off the dial, then you know somebody's fibbing.
Elvis had dinner at my place last night, and he said I had a good singing voice.
Now, of course, if the person you're speaking to is a good actor, or they sincerely believe what they're telling you, then it won't work. But the one advantage the truth phone has over all other lie detection devices is the fact that the other person doesn't know they're being tested.
The truth phone is a privacy nightmare and a potentially legal issue for the user. But we were really optimistic about the future. And so we'd see something come out and we'd think, oh, that's pretty cool. We've gone far beyond the truth phone. Like, our smartphones know everything about us.
Backtracking to 1994, and smartphones weren't vying for our attention. Yet holding focus was still a struggle. So Professor Doug Winton came up with this novel solution.
Doug's stunts are not designed to upstage the world's magicians, but to prove a point. By illustrating principles of physics by using extremes like this one, he's able to help students remember them.
My bottom.
The unusual nail bed stunt was explaining the transfer of energy and why Caroline West would survive this hammer unharmed.
That's because when we have so many different pressure points where the force is pushing down, it's spread across that area rather than one nail taking all that pressure. The more nails you have, the more comfortable that bed actually is.
The thing that drives a nail through a board is kinetic energy.
Doug had an experiment for every law of physics, whether it was mass, velocity, or thermal inertia.
All right, what I've got here then is a pan of molten lead. So what I'm going to do is just put my hand in there very quickly. Doesn't burn at all.
He didn't escape all of his demos 100% unscathed, but his dedication was paying off.
I've taken all 3 of his courses right in a row because I've enjoyed them so much.
So this bed of nails demo, or experiment, if you want to call it that, is still a popular one in science presenting circles around the world. Yeah, I've done it. I'd done it, and if there was one here, I'd do it again.
What? Not all students needed wacky tricks to turn up for class. Convenience was the appeal of Professor Bob Anzenberg's lectures.
You have to take the courses where your people are, or you're just not delivering good quality service to the community. Today's topic will be near and dear to your heart, money.
So he was teaching a business degree on a 1-hour commuter train from Franklin to Boston. Now those who were overstretched could maximise their time.
I have a 1.5-year-old, so getting the time to study at home is virtually impossible.
Women in particular feel the pressures of busy lives as they try to juggle their families with careers. So it's not surprising to find that this travelling body of students are in fact all women. This morning, Bob is taking them through the finer points of downsizing.
This was the era of you can have it all, you can have a family and a career, which obviously meant that you should have a family and a career, which meant particularly women were incredibly time poor. So they really had to extract every possible ounce out of every minute.
While learning on the train was a necessity for some, it did cause the occasional commuter kerfuffle.
We found that there were people who gravitated to that particular car because they enjoyed the lectures, because they found it stimulating in the morning. And then there were some people who said, just leave me alone. Some who said, those people are sitting in my seat, you know?
Fast forward 30 years, and studying on the move has become the norm. Earning a degree is more accessible than ever.
Now we might be able to look up a series of lectures from MIT on our computer, but to actually have a lecture delivered in a carriage, in some ways, that's something more. This was really, I guess, ahead of its time.
Throughout the 80s and 90s, we'd witnessed many ambitious entrepreneurs, professors and students trying to make their mark. Yes, you heard right. Humans and dolphins were set to form a colony in space.
Project Blue Star is a space station described as a think tank in space for humans and dolphins to be constructed in the early 21st century.
Yes, you heard right. Humans and dolphins were set to form a colony in space. I mean, seriously?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I thought about was, like, show me this thing, because I want this. If you can bring this to fruition, I would pay any amount of money to get there.
It consists of a large sphere of water. The sphere of water is then surrounded by a dome which contains air for the humans and dolphins to breathe. The centrepiece of Blue Star is a sophisticated computer which would translate dolphin sonar projections into imagery which we can understand and read with our eyes.
But what exactly were humans and these marine mammals going to achieve in space?
We know that dolphins, after 30 million years of living in weightlessness in the oceans, have a much more highly evolved brain. So it could be that our evolution is inhibited by the burden of gravity that we have to adopt being on the planet.
Before animal activists could shoot down the project, Bob Perry probably realised dolphins aren't actually smarter than humans, and the Blue Star concept changed direction.
This project was going to become a video game, essentially. Unfortunately, the developer who was making that went bankrupt before it could happen, and so we never got Project Blue Star in real life or in digital life.
The 80s and 90s were about looking good and feeling even better. Meditation and breath work weren't mainstream, but we were starting to tune into our emotions.
Getting a little bit more ratty, a bit more irritable, and my libido's perhaps not up to what it should be either. So it's quite noticeable.
I actually noticed before he does, I think.
Just when you thought this was a segment on mental health, Maxine Gray set us straight, rather bluntly.
They say life begins at 40, but by that age, most men know their chances of looking or functioning like a Greek god are really quite remote. By then, they're generally losing their hair, their muscle tone, and their zest for life. Generally, they put it down to middle age, but a Harley Street doctor is convinced it's the male menopause.
The alleged culprit was a drop in testosterone. But Dr. Malcolm Carruthers had a simple fix, a bi-yearly hormone injection that made up the shortfall.
It really is perfectly safe and highly beneficial to use it. Often these are business people who have been real sort of leaders of their organisation, and so this just restores normal business competitiveness and drive in all directions, both in the boardroom and in the bedroom as well.
Which was the case for Bernard Collin.
The effect was quite remarkable. Within 10 days, there was the whole general improvement.
He started being wonderful. He was really great, like he used to be before. It was almost like sort of we're just going out still courting. It was really nice.
This was really, I think, a drug looking for a disease. Testosterone is an amazing hormone. I mean, there's a reason that it's banned in sport. It makes you feel incredible. This idea that testosterone is this cure-all for middle age, it isn't, but it's definitely something that's been very, very carefully marketed in that direction.
20 years later, male menopause is still considered by many to be a myth. So we'll never know the real cause of Bernard's mood swings. Unless, like in women, it was down to hair colour.
Germany's Kiel and Mainz universities have found blondes are more happy-go-lucky and have a more stable temperament than other females. While the researchers are investigating further, we brunettes with our nasty temperaments are left to wonder how many of the blondes surveyed found their good temperament in a bottle.
If that pseudoscience makes you want to yell, then you're in luck.
Do you ever feel a need to scream?
Of course, does it everyone?
With the Scream Muffler, you could let it all out without causing a scene.
Just scream into it, huh? What the hell? Hey, far out, right?
You feel good? You like it?
Oh, hey, I gotta get at least 3. At least 3.
This judgment-free anger device was the brainchild of Diane Berkowitz.
Can you tell me a bit about how it works?
Well, first we wanted a sphere just because of the shape. It's a pleasing shape, it's pacifying. And also when we scream or let out noise, this absorbs it into the sphere. And then plastic absorbs more as an isolation barrier. And then your hand can dampen it a bit.
So I should use my hands to aid this now.
It will even work better.
Diane was a walking billboard for her own product. She was cool and calm, which hadn't always been the case.
Diane, I've got to ask you, what on earth gave you the idea for this in the first place?
I was working for somebody in an advertising agency who made me want to scream all the time. And I thought it would be great to have something in the office that you could scream into and just let all your stress out.
The Scream Muffler was never a commercial success. But we have embraced rage therapy. It's now a $17 billion industry.
Life has become increasingly stressful, and we've seen an evolution, in a way, of the scream muffler in things like rage rooms and scream therapy. Sometimes you just gotta smash stuff.
By the end of the 90s, we'd seen human creativity go to places we never imagined. While many of these left-of-field inventions faded into obscurity, some of the craziest ideas stuck around.
Crazy ideas may seem crazy at the time, but if you consider a brand like Tesla, for example, Tesla wouldn't exist today if it wasn't for left-of-field thinking. And if you expand that beyond cars, it is in every industry. You have a left-of-field thinker that comes in and does something, and it can completely evolve what we're all doing.
And without these offbeat visionaries, we'd have never seen just how brilliant, bizarre and boundless the human mind can be.